So, my friends, although people are still streaming in, we have such a magnificent marquee of talent for you all to have a conversation with that I am going to get us started even as people are getting settled. I'm Kori, the Deputy Director of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, and I am so happy all of you are showing up for a late afternoon special session. And I trust it is because it's such an important one, which is managing competition in regional security cooperation. We have count them five fantastic folks for you to learn from today. Minister Mark, General Pandjaitan, Admiral de Bonnaventure, Assistant Secretary Singh, and Senior Colonel Zhou. So I am going to not waste any of our precious time. I am going to let them start right along the way. Minister Mark of New Zealand, won't you tell us how you think about this problem?
Thank you, Kori. Thank you very much for the introduction. Nau mai haere ki te hui nei. Inga mana, inga rio rātou tikanga. Inga rangatira mā. Haere, tēnā koutou katoa. I just thought I'd open by welcoming you in my native tongue and in brief to one, recognise the status, the appointments and the positions you hold on appointment by your respective governments. To secondly, recognise your native language and your own particular culture and the cultures assembled in this room. And thirdly, to recognise you all as leaders of your within your respective nations and to welcome you and greet you thrice. So, good afternoon. Look, thank you. I'd like to also thank our Singaporean hosts for their warm hospitality and to the International Institute for Strategic Studies for this invitation to speak at this, my very first Shangri-La Dialogue. Positive and constructive regional security cooperation is important to New Zealand. As a small country, we are a great supporter of multilateral and cooperative solutions to regional security challenges. We value being part of a regional security architecture framework that promotes dialogue and cooperation, whether that be the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, the East Asia Summit, the ASEAN Regional Forum, or the ASEAN Defence Ministers Meeting Plus, known as ADMM+. The threats facing us individually and collectively have become increasingly complex and challenging. The international rules-based order is coming under significant pressure. This pressure has its roots first in geostrategic competition, as we have seen increasing efforts by some states to pursue greater influence over others in ways that challenge international norms and at times the sovereignty of smaller states. Pressure on the rules-based order also stems from intensifying transnational challenges such as climate change, transnational criminals, and other malicious non-state actors and cyber threats. Across geography and domains, challenges once conceived as future trends are becoming present realities. This complex reality is difficult for one country to manage alone. As such, it is critical we take every opportunity to build trust through openness and transparency and dialogue. Addressing the direct and indirect impacts of terrorism, human trafficking, people smuggling, transnational crime, climate change, and natural disasters all demand effective cooperation and collaboration. I'm echoing Secretary Mattis' remarks from last year's Shangri-La Dialogue when I say only working in concert can take us forward. The importance of regional cooperation, including supporting the broader regional security architecture centred on ASEAN and APEC, was further emphasised by Secretary Mattis this morning during his announcement of the US Free and Open Indo-Pacific strategy. New Zealand has a critical interest in peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region, and particular strategic interest in our Pacific neighbourhood. My colleague, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand, Winston Peters, noted in a recent speech to the Lowry Institute when launching our Pacific Reset policy that it is appropriate that all countries in the region focus on legitimate defence, but we do not want to see military competition in the region. Regional security cooperation helps to manage competition. It is only through partnership, dialogue, preventative diplomacy, consultation, and cooperation that we will be best able to collectively manage and respond to our future security challenges. The ever-growing complexity of our strategic environment is one of the reasons why New Zealand has, over recent months, been reviewing our strategic defence policy settings. We want to ensure our defence policy settings reflect our new government's priorities and respond to the challenges we see in the evolving strategic environment. New Zealand's updated defence policy settings will be published later this month on a new policy statement, but I wanted to share with you some of our thinking on the strategic environment and highlight the value we place on regional security cooperation. New Zealand's defence policy statement will reinforce the priority placed on New Zealand Defence Force's ability to deliver a range of operational effects in New Zealand's immediate neighbourhood, which stretches from the South Pole to the equator. New Zealand is a Pacific nation, and the New Zealand government places vital importance on our ability to work with and alongside our Pacific partners. The policy statement will also reiterate New Zealand's long-standing commitment to contributing to peace and security in the Asia-Pacific and further afield. As security cooperation in our region is expansive, dynamic, and diverse, there are both heightened risks from competition and more opportunities for cooperation. We would like to propose 5 principles to manage regional security competition and guide effective and coordinated cooperation. First, adherence to and promotion of the international rules-based order. This order underpins productive cooperation, stability, good governance, and collective security. We all benefit from the regulation and coordination that comes from this contract between states. Perhaps one of the best examples in the defence realm is the ASEAN Defence Ministers Meeting Plus. ASEAN-centric forums such as 8MM Plus provide exemplary frameworks for practical and effective cooperation. For the 18 member states, the 80MM Plus has provided a prescriptive structure which underpins well-coordinated and targeted cooperation across a range of disciplines, including maritime security, counter-terrorism, peacekeeping, cybersecurity, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, military medicine, and humanitarian mine action. The maritime domain, the adoption and application of CUES, the Code for Unplanned Encounters at Sea, by members of the Western Pacific Naval Symposium in 2014 and 80MM Plus countries in 2017, is a very positive step and a good demonstration of cooperation that helps to manage the risks arising from a more competitive region, especially in the congested waters of Asia-Pacific, and we also support the extension of this initiative to the air domain as well. The second principle we would propose is that in this increasingly complex and challenging security environment, more engagement and cooperation, not less, is the key to avoiding duplication, miscalculation, and misunderstanding. That is why New Zealand established the Southwest Pacific Heads of Maritime Forces meeting in 2017, as endorsed by the South Pacific Defence Ministers meeting. This brought together representatives from Papua New Guinea, Fiji, Tonga, Australia, France, Cook Islands, Niue, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, and New Zealand Maritime Forces to facilitate cooperation and coordination on maritime security in the South Pacific. But more engagement does not necessarily mean an expansion of forums and meetings. This can stretch already stressed organisations and confuse or complicate. Instead, we should work within the existing multilateral forums and organisations where we can. For example, in 2017, Pacific Island Forum leaders usefully decided to strengthen and expand their existing commitments to regional security cooperation, including the Bikitawa Declaration signed in 2000. The idea is to improve what we already have. In its expanded form, the so-called Bikitawa Plus Declaration will foster targeted cooperation to address emerging, newer threats and be the basis for deeper cooperation and inclusive regional cooperation. As a third principle, we encourage countries and organisations to identify their strengths and companion areas of niche expertise. It's about knowing what you're good at and delivering targeted cooperation that plays to your strengths. For New Zealand's part, we focus on working cooperatively with other nations on areas such as humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, women, peace and security, and building capability through training. For example, in Asia, New Zealand has provided training and conducted lessons learned with the Vietnam Armed Forces Peacekeeping Centre. New Zealand was also pleased to recently send 2 senior officers to participate in the Indonesian Armed Forces hosted First Asia Pacific Military Women's Seminar in 2018. Fourth, the principle that is so often forgotten is inclusivity. This is not only about membership, but it is importantly about valuing and promoting the diversity of perspectives and enabling a range of voices to be heard. Finally, we propose a fifth principle, that as a region, we must be forward-looking and future-proof our cooperation. We need to turn our attention to geostrategic, environmental and technological changes now and think carefully about how they may redefine future security cooperation. We know that due to climate change, natural disasters are going to increasingly test us with their severity and their frequency. We should continue to prioritise humanitarian assistance and disaster relief cooperation so that when disasters do strike, we don't have to play catch-up and have the systems in place to respond appropriately and effectively. We also have to build resilience in the face of such challenges and ensure we translate dialogue and exercises into practical outcomes. In summary, a collective commitment to counter threats more effectively and efficiently should be at the heart of our cooperation, bringing an open and honest mindset to the table, being inclusive, future-thinking, adhering to our international obligations, and championing areas of expertise will set us on the right path. Kia ora koutou and thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Minister. Next up, Retired General Pandjaitan, the Coordinating Minister for Maritime Affairs of Indonesia.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Schake. And a very good day to all of distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great pleasure to address this annual meeting of strategic importance for our region. Lately, we have listened to pundits and the media about the coming or even already ongoing new Cold War. I beg to differ. Cold War was a war between ideological blocs run by countries. The enemies were clear. The tools of war to inflict upon enemies were also clear. Today, conflicts are no longer between countries. Enemies are not clear and traditional deterrents, such as nuclear weapons or economic blockade, or useless against the like of ISIS. Yes, Osama bin Laden was dead. But it did not stop ISIS to emerge. Yes, ISIS was defeated. Yet, we still witness lone wolves or very small cells of people continue to look for an opportunity and luck to terrorize our people. They need to be lucky just once, while we governments have to work 365 days a year to be lucky all the time. To talk about Cold War when countries still trade and infest one another with clear international accepted rules, or work together in addressing natural disasters, or establishing a joint and also coordinated international sea patrols to fight piracy was rather difficult to understand. Or perhaps some still believe the utility of Cold War strategy, that they want to implement its spirit in some forms or another, such as the idea of containment. In our region, Asia region, we have witnessed some ideas to deploy this old strategy of containment. Let me tell you, this will not be successful because the world trades with Asia, the world invests in Asia, the world sends its ship to navigate to Asia, the world draws tourism from Asia, and many more aspects to interstate and people relation are being made in with or for Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, containment is just not going to work here in our neighborhood. But similarly, Indonesia does not want to see this area as a theater of power projection, making countries and its people nervous or be forced to choose sides. Indonesia, for one, will never choose sides. We only choose the side of international law, the side of working towards creating and maintaining peace and stability, the side of reducing poverty, and the side of cleaning up our environment, including our ocean. Thus, for us, containment is unrealistic, but projection of power is also unacceptable. What about competition? We welcome competition, but not competition to contain or competition to project power, but positive competition to create a better place for all of us in the region. The question is how we manage a positive competition. For Indonesia, as an individual nation in the region, we have our approach on this matter. As we all see today, there are a number of initiatives launched by various countries, such as Belt Road Initiative, Free and Open Indo-Pacific, IISS, and Indo-Pacific Strategy. They have different angles and approaches, be the economic or strategic position or security consideration, yet they have a commonality, namely they are all in one way or another overlap with Indonesia, including especially Indonesian waters. For each of these initiatives to be successful, they have to cooperate with Indonesia that has the longest territory, which is home to major global choke points. Indonesia, ladies and gentlemen, welcomes all of these initiatives, as already stated within our Indonesian Ocean Policy 2017. Indonesia wishes to work with all of them as long as they respect international law, and as such, freedom of navigation must always be maintained. Indonesia is full committed to this. Indonesia allows its waters to be used for international navigation, as in the case of the Strait of Malacca, Singapore, Sunda, Lombok, and Makassar. In regard to the intention of bringing more investment to Indonesia, we believe that they must bring the first technology as well as their eco-friendly technology. The investment should also allow the use of substantial local content, transfer of technology, using Indonesian employees, conducting business to business, and at the same time should not increase pressure on our government budget. For Indonesia as a member of ASEAN, we believe that all those initiatives are indeed great for ASEAN interests and is enshrined in ASEAN Charter as long as they respect their own legally binding duties toward ASEAN countries stipulated under TSC. They also need to respect international law to support the centrality and unity of ASEAN, and not to deploy what we call it divide et impera, or divide and conquer strategy against the sacred principle of ASEAN unity. Other great powers outside ASEAN in Southeast Asia are not ASEAN strategic rival. They are all ASEAN strategic partner, and as strategic partners, they must continue to work with ASEAN peacefully. On large-scale security cooperation, which can be sensitive countries in the region, and proponents of those initiatives need to work together through the ASEAN infrastructure, such as the ASEAN Regional Forum, the ASEAN Defense Minister Meeting. They can choose to work through less sensitive areas, for instance, ocean environment such as ocean cleanup from marine plastics debris, that Indonesia has led a global and regional level, and also disaster relief and management. This is my humble views, is the way to manage positive competition and the conflict great power interests. Ladies and gentlemen, another important aspect in managing positive competition is also working with countries with economic power from different regions, for instance, Europe. This conference is started from European think tank, and this gathering we have defense minister from Germany, high-ranking official from UK, France, and European Union. We hope to see more European cooperation in our region in some security issues, whether jointly through a European Union in Brussels or individually through Berlin, London, or Paris. After all, many, if not all of us, have Airbus in our hangars, and our waters are being navigated by European vessels every hour of the day in every year. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, let me conclude that the peace and stability in Asia is the stake of all of us. We see the perpetual conflicts in another region, and we do not want to see that happening here in Asia. I do hope the country individually and collectively will rise above its narrow interests and work hard for the public goods in Asia. Before I end my speech, I would like also to brief you about what happened in Surabaya. In Surabaya, the terrorist attack some time ago, it is one of the sleeping cell of the ISIS. And we are very happy today that we have they passed already anti-terrorist law in the parliament, which is, I think, we have right to conduct what we call a preemptive to any movement of the hardline or ISIS sleeping cell in Indonesia. And I can also tell you that Indonesian government right now, Indonesian country so far successful to see the mapping of the terrorist activity in Indonesia. So, ladies and gentlemen, which is the wealth of our own people and free from wars. Let me say again, thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you again. Yeah.
Thank you. Vice Admiral de Bonnaventure is the Acting Director General of International Relations and Security, the Ministry of Armed Forces of France.
Thank you. Thank you, ministers, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here to convince you on my view on the regional security cooperations. And so I'm the Acting Director General for International Relations and Strategy for the Ministry of Defense, but also I'm the Ministerial Coordinator in charge of the security of maritime spaces. So I will orient my presentation a little about the maritime. For France, it is essential to maintain multilateralism and rules-based international order. And this is the key for regional security cooperations. I will focus my speech on how governments and armed forces can coordinate their different initiatives. Regional security cooperation is a diverse phenomenon that involves the great majority of states in the Indo-Pacific. Many observers question whether the several meetings, declarations, military contacts, institutions might not lead to a vastful duplication of efforts. To my point of view, all initiatives existing in the Indo-Pacific are essential. They play a very important role in overcoming rooted conflicts between states, contributing to peaceful international relations. And I really want to convince you of that. So the question is how a system made of states and regional groupings can be organized to be efficient and contribute to global security. France, as a nation present in both the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, has of course its own national interests. But our interests are linked to neighbors' interests. And in fact, interdependency is the root of the success of multilateralism. We seek to defend our interests in a way that also it enhances regional security. France has made many efforts to increase resources in order to make regional cooperation capable of actively handling the security environment. The maritime threats in the Indo-Pacific are described in our Defense and National Security Review that we just issued last December. It is said that maritime areas are subject to rising tensions due to the key role in the globalization of all kinds of flows, including data via undersea cables, due to the resources they hold, and due to the development of long-distance naval and airstrike capabilities. The Indo-Pacific region experiences directly these challenges. As a nation of the Indian and Pacific Ocean, France shares with you the risks and the threats that you face in your exclusive economic areas and on your coast, and I want to convince you that the good answer is the respect of the rules-based order, as my previous speaker says. That's why France is committed to build a new strong Indo-Pacific strategy. This strategy was outlined by President Macron in his recent speech in Australia last month. It is based on 4 key elements. First one is addressing the main crisis through dialogue and constant discussion. Second one is ensuring common safety and security through cooperation. The third one is protecting the sovereignty of the regional states. And the fourth one is fighting against climate change. To achieve these goals, the French strategy is deployed through different means which contribute to regional security cooperations. We deploy significant military assets, both in Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. We establish a strong strategic partnership, and we enforce multilateral institutions. First, France deploys significant military assets in the Indo-Pacific region to ensure the protections and surveillance of our economic exclusive zone. We have permanent base in the UAEs, Djibouti, La Réunion, New Caledonia, and French Polynesia. which provide a far-flung network of military air and seaborne assets, enabling continuous action. For instance, in the Indian Ocean, France is in charge of a huge area for search and rescue around La Réunion Island and in the south of Indian Ocean. In the South Pacific, along with Australia and New Zealand, France is fully committed in the France Agreement, aiming at coordinating civil and military assistance to the Pacific Island countries affected by natural disaster. The specific challenge of the Indo-Pacific area is its vastness. In the Pacific Ocean, France, with New Caledonia and French Polynesia, hold responsibility for an area as large as the European continent. France is also strengthening its relation with many powers that share its vision of international security. The securation of the seas and oceans increase the need for cooperation between states. France as partner are primarily India, Australia, the United States, Japan, as well as Malaysia, Singapore, New Zealand, Indonesia, and Vietnam. France pursues a remarkable cooperation with Australia and New Zealand in the South Pacific in relation to the United States and the Quad Forum. Information sharing between regional security actors is essential to ensure the security of the maritime domain. And in 2016, France and India initiated a dialogue on maritime security issues. It led to the signature in March 2018 by the two heads of the states of a joint vision on the Indian Ocean, which illustrates their common approach to the Indo-Pacific. The French government believes that multilateral institutions must play a key role in fostering and enforcing rules and norms, which are essential for solving regional issues and improve relations between states. The promotion of regional security also lies in the existence of institutions, forums, and network of partnership. This is why in the Indo-Pacific, France is a dialogue partner to the Indian Ocean Rim Association. France is a member of the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, of the Western Pacific Naval Symposium, and the South Pacific Defense Ministerial Meeting. France has been playing a pioneering role in the strategic integration of the link between defense and environment. Regional security cooperation can contribute to bridge the gap between traditional and non-traditional security issues. In particular, there is today an urgent need to collectively address environment security issue. In the Indo-Pacific, drought, floods, rising water level, coral reef erosions are not just natural events. They are also military events because the redo maps create new tension, displaced population. So France is focusing on 3 lines of actions. It is first depth assessment of environmental risk, sponsoring of targeted scientific programs, and the organization of regional seminars to raise awareness and encourage mobilization. This path opened a new field of cooperation with Indo-Pacific states. And from that perspective, France organized 2 conferences in 2017 in Vietnam and Indonesia, and will pursue this course of action with other Asian member states. To conclude, I consider that each multilateral forum offers a different perspective that is useful to the global discussion. Bilateral and plurilateral partnerships help us to enhance common understanding and to share capacities. What is necessary to us is to conduct a clear and transparent assessment of the needs. We must acknowledge the strengths and the weaknesses of the institutional and operational means that are at our disposal, and we must get ready to improve them. The more we discuss, the more ideas and interests we share, the more solutions we will find to prevent and fight the threats that we face. that is the best way to enhance multilateralism and promote its efficiency. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Assistant Secretary Singh runs Economic and Business Affairs in the U.S. Department of State.
Thank you, Dr. Schake, and I'd like to thank IISS for the opportunity to participate in this panel today. It is also my first visit here to the Shangri-La Dialogue. Throughout the day, we've heard a lot about regional security and defense issues. I'd like to continue that theme, of course, but from a different perspective. As the Assistant Secretary of State for Economic and Business Affairs, in my work, I have full view of a key principle of President Trump's national security strategy, that economic security is national security. This has never been more true than in today's digitally connected world. National security and economic security are interwoven, and economic measures play a direct role in fostering security. The United States has a centuries-old trading relationship with this region. American businesses have historically been a critical part of forming these strong bonds. The same is true today as U.S. business interests in ASEAN continue to grow and adapt to the expanding opportunities here. Economic partnerships are a strong foundation for our greater engagement with the region. In light of the nature of this dialogue, I'd like to discuss a few ways the U.S. government, often in cooperation with other governments and the private sector, employs economic tools in service to national and regional security. The first and very prominent of these tools are sanctions. The recent developments regarding North Korea are a prime example of the impact of effective sanctions in furthering key security goals. The United States has led a global effort to enact critical sanctions that have compelled North Korea's regime to reconsider escalation in favor of diplomacy. All the countries represented here at the Shangri-La Dialogue, convinced of the threat posed by the DPRK's development of nuclear and ballistic missile technologies, have contributed to the effectiveness of these sanctions. Recent overtures made by North Korea are encouraging, but they need to be the first steps of many towards the unnegotiable objective of the international community, which is the complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. President Trump has recently announced that the June 12th summit will be taking place right here in Singapore. The United States has also increased pressure on the regime in Tehran. By withdrawing U.S. participation in the JCPOA, President Trump has signaled the need to counter the full range of threats Iran poses to our collective interests, including their aggressive ballistic missile development and proliferation, and their support for terrorism. Moving forward, we intend to work with allies to conduct an economic pressure campaign on Iran, among other measures. This effort will bring necessary pressure to bear on Iran to change its behavior and pursue a new framework, one which needs to comprehensively address all aspects of the concerns of the United States and the international community. Again, economic sanctions will be a critical tool in achieving a necessary security objective. I'd now like to turn to another key topic in the economic security arena, and that is cybersecurity, perhaps the dominant emerging foreign policy and security challenge of the 21st century. All of our nations are affected by threats to connected networks, and every year our economies become more digitally enabled. With increased connections come increased vulnerabilities. For example, last year's NotPetya attack caused over $1 billion in losses to companies that were effectively untargeted collateral damage. This sort of indiscriminate, destructive attack is destabilizing and can cause irreparable, catastrophic harm. We must act to counter such threats. The United States works with partners around the world to impose consequences on those actors whose malicious actions threaten global and regional economies. Cybersecurity policies made by governments around the world are necessary to enable our businesses to safely and effectively operate across borders. Similarly, digital economy, internet, and telecom policies shape the cybersecurity environment. We believe the more that the internet reflects the ideals of freedom, fairness, and transparency, the better it will be for all countries and for all economies. ASEAN nations have made cybersecurity a leaders-level issue as part of their efforts to strengthen cyber cooperation and demonstrate their commitment to act as responsible states in cyberspace. We welcome such progress. Another related area of focus is maritime security, which some of my co-panelists have discussed today. We've been talking about how cyber threats to our collective national and security transcend national boundaries and the importance of a collective response. Maritime security is another area where unity of effort is very important. There are too diverse and too many challenges for any one agency or one government to address them all. Since the end of the Second World War, the United States has demonstrated a commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific region grounded in a rules-based international order. That commitment continues today. Fundamental to this is the openness that comes from the freedom of the seas. Economic prosperity relies on a maritime system that freely and securely connects the world's markets. As Secretary Mattis said this morning, sea lanes are arteries of economic vitality for us all. Improving maritime security and maritime domain awareness is a key component of our bilateral relations in many parts of the world, from the Caribbean to the Pacific to the Gulf of Guinea. The State Department, along with our Defense Department colleagues, is involved in a number of aviation and maritime security capacity building efforts around the world. We need to expand these efforts to include maritime security as a key component. A final area in which we can cooperate is in how we review foreign investments, given the growing recognition that free and open economies must have and use such tools in support of their national security. The link between investment security and national security is abundantly clear. President Trump has stressed the importance of promoting American prosperity by pursuing free, fair, and reciprocal economic relationships while also protecting U.S. critical infrastructure and other security interests. When sensitive technology and intellectual property cross borders, they are only as secure as the weakest of the national regulatory frameworks that holds them. This challenge requires effective investment review mechanisms and enhanced information sharing in collaboration with like-minded nations. It is in our mutual interest to cooperate with allies and partners to address national security risks related to foreign investment to prevent loopholes in any of our individual investment screening mechanisms. The U.S. is committed to working with our partners to devise more market-friendly, transparent, and sustainable alternatives to an approach that is based on state subsidies and unsustainable debt that may make recipients vulnerable to strategic coercion. In closing, as Secretary Mattis did this morning, I'd like to reiterate U.S. commitment to this region. Our Indo-Pacific strategy is focused on ensuring the freedom of the seas and skies, promoting market-based economies, supporting good governance and liberty, and insulating sovereign nations from external coercion. Our economies are intertwined across the Indo-Pacific region, and our deep cooperation to economic security reflects that. It's important that we continue to find ways to improve coordination to our mutual advancement. We look forward to working to enhance liberty, prosperity, and security for everyone in the region. Thank you.
Our final speaker on this Star-Spangled panel is Senior Colonel Zhou, the Director of the Security Cooperation Center at the Central Military Committee of China.
Thank you, Ms. Schake, for this opportunity. When I received the work to talk on managing competitions in security cooperation, I thought this is too philosophical for a simple-minded soldier like me. I struggled to think philosophically on this, and here are my simple points of a simple-minded soldier. In recent years, the Asia-Pacific region has generally enjoyed peace, stability, and flourishing economic development, making it an area with the fastest economic growth and greatest potential in the world. China itself has contributed up to 30% of the global economic growth. Meanwhile, traditional security issues like territorial disputes and maritime demarcation still haunt, and the DPRK nuclear issue was once on the verge of running out of control. Some countries have stepped up their military deployment in the region, making it more obvious that the military alliance is targeting at a third country. There is a severe backlash of terrorism from the Middle East. Piracy, drug smuggling, and human trafficking remain rampant. Besides, the Asia-Pacific region is still faced with the most frequent natural disasters. These security issues come from both traditional and non-traditional fronts. The Asia-Pacific observes not only a US-led military alliance system, but also other organizations featuring non-alliance and openness, such as Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Conference on Mutual Trust and Trust in Asia. There are also bilateral and multilateral dialogue mechanisms like ASEAN Regional Forum, ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting Plus, Shangri-La Dialogue, Western Pacific Naval Symposium, and China's Xiangshan Forum. DPRK and the US may adopt complete different approaches to even the same issue as denuclearization on the peninsula. DPRK presumably is more willing to take denuclearization as a result, while the US maintains a comprehensive, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization as a precondition. Therefore, there is a grave deficit in mutual trust between them, and the prospects are far from optimistic. Likewise, although most countries in the world support freedom of navigation, they vary in the interpretations of such concept in UNCLOS. China maintains that freedom of navigation should not be one-sidedly and deliberately misinterpreted as freedom of military activities at the cost of the interest and security of littoral states. Obviously, these heterogeneous issues do not share a uniform remedy. It is known to all that there is no unified security structure in the Asia-Pacific similar to NATO or OSCE in Europe. Some people once proposed that the East Asia Summit plays a leading role in regional security structure. This is unrealistic. For example, if the DPRK nuclear issue is the most outstanding security issue of the region, then it's evident that the East Asia Summit is not the best platform for a solution. Due to difference in history, tradition, social system, development level, faith, and value, it is the only right choice to promote mutual trust, seek a common ground while shelving differences, enhance mutual trust and mutual benefit to showcase glamour and splendor of different civilizations. The security structure in this area can only be composite, multi-layered, and multifaceted. Deeply aware that peaceful development of its own is closely linked to the future of Asia-Pacific, China put forward the concept of common, comprehensive, and cooperative security and support active bilateral and multilateral security dialogues and collaboration in an effort to move forward economic cooperation and security cooperation in the region. China advocates that any country should not pursue its own absolute security at the expense of that of others. A small country should not be marginalized by a large country, and a large country should not be taken advantage of by the small country. What China wants is not to replace the existing Asia-Pacific security architecture, but to supplement and improve it with cooperation instead of conflict at the core. How can we guarantee security in the Asia-Pacific region? First and foremost, sound interactions among major powers hold the key. It is no exaggeration to say that the Asia-Pacific can only enjoy stability when Sino-US relations remain stable. China upholds non-conflict, non-confrontation, mutual respect, and a win-win cooperation with the United States, which on the one hand focuses on bilateral relationship, and on the other hand accommodates the security in Asia-Pacific and even the whole world. China speaks highly of the positive progress in crisis management made by the two sides in recent years. But we have also noted that over the past years and more, the United States not only reinforced its surveillance and reconnaissance against China by airplanes and ships, but also increased its military activities in the South China Sea, posing challenge to China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. This is inconsistent with the calming situation in the South China Sea, as well as the U.S. claim that it won't take a position on the sovereignty of South China Sea or take sides on the South China Sea issue. As an extra-regional country, the United States turns out to be a prominent factor of instability on the issue, which impeded effective cooperation between China and the U.S. within the Asia-Pacific multilateral mechanism. Second, any regional security architecture should be open and inclusive. Indeed, there are military alliances left over from the Cold War in the Asia-Pacific, but allied countries are only minority, not majority. So Cold War mentality, defined by ideology and friend or foe, has long been outdated. Under whatever pretext, should not the expansion of military alliance represent the trend of the times? We have also taken note of the Indo-Pacific concept raised by some countries. We believe any new initiative should promote its transparency, inclusiveness, and openness. Move in the same direction as global economic integration, political multipolarity, and shared security, and a further win-win progress of all sides. Otherwise, it won't be universally accepted and may turn out to be a monologue and a flash in the pan. Third, compared with traditional security, countries in the region have reached more consensuses on non-traditional security and made more relevant endeavors. Thus, we should continue to give priority to cooperation in non-traditional security fields and gradually accumulate experience and mutual trust. For example, ASEAN Regional Forum, established in 1994, initiated multilateral security dialogues among Asia-Pacific countries, providing a useful platform for security dialogue and cooperation for 27 member states over the past 20-odd years. But it has its own limitations. ASEAN is only one of the pillars of the Asia-Pacific security architecture and cannot dominate major country relationship. The so-called ASEAN way reflects a distinctive ASEAN work mode, but in a way discounts efficiency and implementation. ADM Plus, set up in 2010, has made notable progress in implementation, but it still faces similar problems such as duplicate subjects and excessive exercises. What's more, these two mechanisms have overlapping functions. The key to the settlement of these issues lies not only in reducing the number of meetings and exercises, but in more practical security cooperation. China highly appreciates the counter-piracy efforts in the Sulu Sea among Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. President Duterte once said that he hoped the two navies of the Philippines and China could stage joint military exercises in the Sulu Sea. We're open to this and are ready to start with HADR and counter-piracy. We also hope that more ASEAN countries and extra-regional states can strengthen the cooperation and jointly cope with all the non-traditional security challenges in the Asia-Pacific. Thank you.
So I think I heard an awful lot of continuity in the 5 presentations. Everybody emphasizing transparency, inclusiveness, openness, and shared security. But I am not sure our 5 panelists meant the same thing when they were using that language. And so I hope in our half hour of question and answer, you will press them on this and any other issue that's on their minds. My favorite thing about the IISS is that we have sharp-edged intellectual debates with gentleness and mutual respect, which is in a lot of ways a model for what we are talking about for managing security cooperation in the region. So please get my attention if you want to ask anyone a question, and when you do, please tell us your name and where you are from. First, the woman holding up her pen towards the end of the table.
I'm so sorry I don't have a placard. I have a comment and a question, if I may. Oh, sorry, I'm Lynn Kwok, and I'm currently at the IISS, previously with Brookings Institution. I have a comment and a question, if I may. My comment is directed to Senior Colonel Zhou. You mentioned that there are varying interpretations of UNCLOS, and I agree, there's no doubt that there is varying interpretations of UNCLOS. However, there are reasonable interpretations and unreasonable ones, and I believe that China in this respect has adopted a rather unreasonable interpretation of UNCLOS. Before the exclusive economic zone was the exclusive economic zone, it was the high seas, and this permitted maritime powers freedom of the seas. When parties signed on to UNCLOS...
May I ask you please to move it along towards the question?
When parties signed on to UNCLOS, when they understood that freedoms of the high seas would be retained, and the only thing that they were carving out were exclusive economic rights, as the name suggests. So it's kind of disingenuous right now to suggest that parties no longer enjoy freedom of the seas and the ability to conduct military activities in the exclusive economic zone. That's my comment. My question is directed to Ms. Singh. Ms. Singh, you mentioned quite rightly that economics is security, and nowhere more so than in the region. It was also quite telling that the first thing you highlighted was sanctions.
Could you please ask a question?
Could you please tell us what positive vision the Trump administration has in terms of economic tools for the region? Because China has its Belt and Road Initiative, and it appears that the Trump administration has bilateral deals and phone calls. So what does it actually have? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take 3 or 4 questions and then let the panel answer it. Right next to her, Mr. Zhang.
Yes. Thank you. I have 2 straightforward questions. One to American allies, New Zealand and France. Do you think that you keep on talking, both of you keep on talking about rule-based, order and so on, but you have a administration in Washington actually breaking all the rules in many areas. How you think this new Indo-Pacific strategy is not more compatible with American first rather than with traditional American-led multilateralism? How confident you are? Then one quick question for Indonesian General is that you mentioned very interesting point that ASEAN doesn't want to take sides, not containment, neither projection power. I'm sure you meant US and China. But my question is, can you think of the opposite may be true also? That is, the American containment strategy is also projection power, and the Chinese projection of power phenomenon may be a counter-containment as well. So Chinese
Very
love the
interesting
concept,
question.
offensive defense.
Very interesting question. Next up.
Thank you very much. My name is Andrew from IISS Indonesia. I have a very short question for Ms. Singh. I'm convinced that you mentioned about the economic security, but to what extent that, in your view, that the economic security could be pursued through multilateral platforms, given some initiatives, like, for example, AIIB, or probably US have something in mind? Thank you.
Another excellent question. I'm going to take one last one, and then I will give the panel the chance to respond to any of these that they care to.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Termsak from the ASEAN Study Center. I have one question for Minister Mark. I noticed that you used Asia-Pacific, and you did not mention Indo-Pacific. I would like to find out where does New Zealand stand as far as Indo-Pacific concept is concerned. And then my question to Senior Colonel Zhou. You mentioned that China would like to supplement and improve international order. Can you tell us which part of the international order that China want to improve and how you want to improve it?
What a raft of great questions those have been. I am going to go down the table and give our speakers the chance to answer any of these that were either addressed to them or they feel like they have something important to contribute on. Minister Mark, would you like to start us?
Taking the last question first, Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific. I apologise. It does appear that we need to adjust our terminology somewhat. We have been used to for years referring to that part of the world that directly affects us, and normally we have talked about Southeast Asia and Pacific in our dialogue. Indo-Pacific, and accepting the way in which the world has moved, is impacting on us even day to day as we receive more and more delegations and more opportunities to engage with India. You'll probably see that in our soon to be released defence strategic policy statement that we recognise the importance of India and the Indo-Pacific region.
General Pandjaitan, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think your question regarding the ASEAN not take a side, I think the problem basically is from superpower, For if you look at from the ASEAN countries, we like to see the stability in this region. So if I may say my humble opinion, if two sides can understand also the need of the ASEAN in this region, we like to see stability and prosperity. And if you look at also, there are some other problem about, the marine debris, which is, I think, very dangerous for the next future of our generation in this area. But in the same time, I think the strategic interest from China and US in this area also increasing. So if everybody or two sides can maintain or hold their own, interest in this area to, do the power projection, I think could maintain the stability in this region. And I believe, again, ASEAN should be solid in order to, make this area become, become stable. Stability in this region is very important. If you don't have stability, I don't think that we can bring prosperity in this region. Like I mentioned in my speech, I think stability is very important. Prosperity is very important. Environment here, especially like marine debris, is the big threat. The ocean is the new, then the next feature of the world, of the global. So again, China and America should, I think, should, look at their side. How do they play the role in South China Sea? Thank you.
Admiral de Bonnaventure, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yes, just to answer the question about, is there any difference between the French strategy and the U.S. strategy? And I think I don't see any difference in the way that our strategy, especially in the Indo-Pacific, is, of course, to address the main crisis through dialogue and the multilateralism. And this dialogue, which, should take part with trust and confidence with the both people, in a dialogue. And if there is a lack of trust, and if there is somebody lie, at this time, we just broke the dialogue, and we can turn to the UN Security Council. And if there is any resolution and sanction, we have to apply these sanctions. And France is with the European Union is of course dedicated to apply the sanction against North Korea until the dialogue can restart. So it's we don't see any difference between our two.
Assistant Secretary Singh?
Thank you. I'll try to go through a couple of the points that were raised. The first was about economic engagement with the region. I would highlight and emphasize that American private sector companies are fully engaged. For instance, here in Singapore, I believe the number is about 4,200 American companies are invested here, doing business here. So let's not underestimate the impact that our private sector has and the expanding relationships that they're creating in the region. Also, a part of our Indo-Pacific strategy that I outlined is about further engagement, specifically in the infrastructure development area. We're looking at plans where there is a need. There are infrastructure funding gaps throughout the ASEAN region, throughout Southeast Asia. And we're developing concrete plans for American companies to partner with, for instance, Japanese companies or other such countries in Asia to come up with specific plans to fill these infrastructure gaps, including how to properly finance them and fill a specific need in this area. So, there are lots of avenues for engagement. I think that there's this perception that somehow because we are reevaluating the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, that there's a lack of trade engagement, which is absolutely not the case. There are many avenues for engagement. And that would also pick up a point on when somebody asked a question about America First. America First has never meant America alone. That it doesn't mean disengagement from the world. But this is where I'll go back to another comment that Secretary Mattis made this morning, and that's that if the plane is in trouble, you put your own oxygen mask on before helping others. And in the case of the United States, we're taking a look at our domestic economy. This president came in and promised the American people that he would look out for the interest of American jobs and American workers. That's exactly what he's doing. That does not at all mean to the exclusion of the rest of the world. In fact, providing opportunities for American companies in global markets is certainly benefiting America while still staying fully engaged with the world. And then the final point on multilateral platforms, we are fully engaged in all of the multilateral platforms. From the WTO perspective, we are looking at ways to resolve our global disputes using the WTO forum. The World Trade Organization is, of course, an institution that is in need of repair. The Doha Development Agenda has been on life support for many, many years now, and I think that's an area where all of us could have a conversation about re-engaging and making it the center of the global rules-based trading system.
Thank you. Colonel Zhou?
Well, first of all, my comment on the comment of the young lady, when you mentioned that for understanding of UNCLOS, there are reasonable and unreasonable interpretations, I think you are wrong, because your answer is unreasonable. The reason is, I just give you an example. When I heard Indians talking about freedom of navigation, I have a very strange feelings. Why? Because India's position toward military activities in exclusive economic zone is quite similar to China's. In 1995, India actually made the open declaration to say that they reserved right regarding territorial delimitation under Article 298. Interesting for me to say, China has an equal reservation for the same article on the same issue. Secondly, India would not allow any foreign military exercises in its exclusive economic zone, especially for those involving weapons and explosives. Again, this is clearly written in India's declaration. And if you compare India's declaration with China's national law in 1998, you would find that China actually support this idea of freedom of navigation almost 20 years ago. So the resentment of India is even much stronger than China's. So I find it quite interesting when people talk about this rule-based order, freedom of navigation, without specification. This is my answer. The second is my answer to the gentleman's question. What kind of aspect in the current international law China doesn't like? Well, I would say China certainly doesn't like a military alliance, but we understand this is a kind of a historical leftover. But what we are strongly opposed to the expansion of such kind of military alliance at a cost of third countries. Again, we do not like kind of a general use of rule-based order, because unless and until you mention specifically what kind of rules they are, we can never agree on what these kind of rules entail. So just to name the other side as a country that does not comply with rule-based order, this is just trying to blackmail someone as a scapegoat, in my simple understanding, and you would never succeed.
So I have 5 more questions in my queue. I'm going to close the queue there, sweep around the table, and give the panel a chance to answer them. First, right there.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Hervé from Indonesia. A very interesting presentation by the panel. I would like to follow up with the statement from Senior Colonel Zhou regarding his statement regarding ASEAN centrality. You mentioned that ASEAN way is lacking in efficiency, and I think that's one of the elephant in the room. How do you suggest China as a strategic partner to ASEAN could help improve ASEAN way in doing so, not in projecting any power to the ASEAN partners?
Excellent question. Ian, you're next.
Thank you. So I've got, my question is to the panel. So when you talk about managing competition and regional cooperation, I'm wondering how institutionalized restraint features in your thinking, not voluntary restraint on action, but institutionalized restraint. So when we talk about rules, institutionalized restraint, and also how does external intervention into domestic politics feature into how you might want to manage competition? That's something else that's been up. So,
excellent. Far end of the table.
Julio Amador from the Philippines. Question to the panel. How do we address ASEAN inefficiencies in its mechanisms to ensure that we are able to respond to these security threats? And also the second question would be, is the era of America as the guarantor, security guarantor of this region over? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next on the far side of the table here, the lady with her microphone way up. Didn't you have a question?
Okay, is it okay? It was not really related to maritime affairs, and it was a question to Colonel Zhou. You said that, but it was about the differences between the US and DPRK. You said that they cannot agree, as one is, for one, denuclearization is a result, and for the other, it's a precondition. What would be the position of China on this issue?
Last question here.
Tôi là Thượng tướng Võ Tiến Trung, nguyên Giám đốc Học viện Quốc phòng Việt Nam đang nghỉ hưu.
My name is Võ Tiến Trung. I'm the retired Senior Lieutenant General from the National Defense Academy of Vietnam. My name is Võ Tiến Trung. I'm the retired Senior Lieutenant General from the National Defense Academy of Vietnam.
Tôi có hai câu hỏi, một là bà Thứ trưởng Ngoại giao của Hoa Kỳ và Đại tá Viện trưởng của Trung Quốc.
I have two questions. Question number one is for the Singh, Assistant Secretary of U.S. Department of State, and the second question is for Senior Colonel Zhou from China.
Sáng nay tôi nghe Bộ trưởng Quốc phòng Mattis và chiều nay nghe ý kiến của bà. Tôi cho rằng những ý kiến đó rất chi là chia sẻ và rất hữu nghị.
This morning I had a chance to listen to the United States Department of Defense, Minister of Defense, and now I have a chance to listen to your idea, and I think all the ideas are very sharing and for friendship.
Rất tôn trọng các nước nhỏ.
Respecting smaller countries.
Nhưng cách đây không lâu, Tổng thống Donald Trump của Hợp Trung Quốc Hoa Kỳ đến thăm Học viện Hải quân. Ông ta có nói rằng Hoa Kỳ phải giành quyền thống lĩnh trên các đại dương.
However, as I know, not long ago, when President Donald Trump visited and had a talk with graduates from U.S. Navy Academy, he said that United States must dominate all the oceans.
Tôi chưa hiểu, tôi đề nghị bà giải thích thêm cái từ thống lĩnh này. Thống lĩnh nghĩa là thế nào? Có tôn trọng cái quyền lợi của các nước khác không?
So how should we see the word domination in this case, and whether that domination will respect the rights of the smaller countries?
Câu hỏi thứ hai tôi dành cho Đại tá Viện trưởng của Trung Quốc.
And my second question for Senior Colonel Zhou.
Very quickly, please.
Yeah. Just the second question.
Ngài nói rất rõ là Trung Quốc tôn trọng cái lợi ích của dân tộc mình, nhưng trên cơ sở tôn trọng lợi ích các dân tộc khác. Cái đây rất hay.
I agree that, as you said, China respect its own national interests, but also at the same time, it also respect the interests of other nations.
Vậy Trung Quốc đưa ra đường 9 đoạn trên Biển Đông có tôn trọng lợi ích của các nước không? Nhất là các nước ASEAN.
I wonder whether the fact that you declare the 9 dotted lines in the South China Sea, whether it is opposite to what you have said or not.
Xin cảm ơn.
Thank you.
What an excellent and rich menu of questions to answer. Sadly, we have but 10 minutes left in our time together, and so I am going to ask the folks on the panel to choose one of the smart things that were asked in that and answer it fully. Spend about 2 minutes apiece, and let's go in reverse order. Please, Colonel.
I can answer in less than 1 minute. About China's position on the DPRK nuclear issue. First, denuclearization. Number two, maintain peace and stability. Third, through dialogue. That's all.
Very good. Assistant Secretary Singh.
Similarly, I'll be very quick and just address a couple of the points. The question about the U.S. being a guarantor of security in this region, I think the position of the United States has always been to be a stabilizing force, to be a friend and a partner. I don't know that I would necessarily use the word guarantor. The U.S. is looking at the world right now. We want to have a constructive influence, a strategic influence, and be a partnership, work in partnership and cooperation with our allies. We don't want to be the ones who are responsible for the security in every neighborhood. Our goal in ASEAN would be to increase cooperation, as this panel has discussed, among the relationships of nations in the region, so that security is something that is handled by every country, with the United States there as a friend and a partner. And as far as President Trump's comments, I think I would say that, President Trump, again, wants the U.S. to be an effective force in the world. And then finally, as far as the institutionalized restraint, I think I would emphasize again that cooperation means knowing when to act and when not to act. I'll close there.
Admiral de Bonnaventure.
Yeah, just a few words to say that facing, all the threat today with the terrorism and trafficking and threat, and we need to work all together. So it's very important to build the cooperations, and the cooperation is based on the rule-based order, and with the small, medium, and big country working together. That's it.
Excellent. General Pandjaitan?
Yes, I just give my comment. I think we have to respect international law. That's number one. Number two, any problem we have to go through dialogue. I think dialogue is a best solution for any problem. If you look at also like North Korea and about the nuclear, but then see soon a dialogue in Singapore. Thank you.
And the last word goes to Minister Mark.
Thank you very much. I think the questions themselves indicate a degree of difference of mind and a difference of view. So with that, I would simply sum it up this way. From New Zealand's perspective, we're a small nation. We will not survive, and we know we will not survive, unless we are able to work with other nations and trade with other nations. We value being part of a regional security architecture framework, but we also value working with people who are able to speak to us frankly, who are respectful, who understand and are open to gaining a better understanding of smaller countries' needs and the challenges they face. We've consistently advocated for challenges and disputes to be managed in accordance with international law and through dialogue underpinned by respect for each other and understanding of our differing needs and the challenges we face.
The astonishing and unprecedented brevity of the closing comments of these 5 speakers all by itself deserves a warm hand from you, in addition to their smart ideas. So I have been asked for you all to leave your name tags on the table. We'll take care of them. I hope you have a very nice evening.